Hi, this is Chris Olson from Performance by Design and the Driven to Engage podcast. Today I want to talk to you about the power of positivity. And I want to plant the seed because I don't have a study to back this up. However, there was a study released this last week from the Future Forum Pulse. And just to give you an idea, the Future Forum publishes this study every 6 months. Future Forum is a consortium focused on building a way of working that is flexible, inclusive, and connected. We conduct research and convene executives to design a people-centered and digital-first workplace. So they come into this study with the idea that they're trying to promote this. That's the only way I can read that. I've read it several times trying to make sure that I'm getting this right. They started doing this back in June of 2020. So you can see that there seems to be a focus toward driving that to prove out their point that they believe that happiness in the workplace is done remotely and flexibly. So flexibly, whatever that means. But what I'm not seeing in this study is how positive feedback impacts the mentality of the team that's in place. So the reason I want to bring this up is as I read this, one of the first things that they promoted early on in their study is the primary motivations for going into the office. Now, as you read this, and we'll share the graphic along with it, there's two things that really stand out in this in the survey. So they surveyed 1,253 people in global positions. So each spring and fall, we provide an in-depth report surfacing new findings about desk workers' experience and expectations. Each summer and winter, we revisit the findings from the previous quarters and refresh the data to provide a snapshot of the state of the workplace. Our winter snapshot answers the frequently asked questions business leaders are considering as they plan and implement new workforce policies. Data draws from a survey of 10,243 workers across the US, Australia, France, Germany, Japan, and the UK, conducted from November 16th to December 22nd of 2022. So this is the winter version of their study. Now, this graphic here is kind of interesting. Primary motivations for going into the office, and I kind of just want to stay on this. What's the motivation? And because I want to get into the question why. So globally, you can see based on these numbers that there's a much bigger ratio of non-executives to executives being surveyed in this study. That's one. But it stands to reason. We have far fewer executives than we do non-executives in the workplace. So what are these motivating factors? Obviously, the executives want it, and it's funny they don't even really give them the option, but the options to choose from are FaceTime with management, a quiet space to work, in-person meetings, creating camaraderie in the workplace with their coworkers, and collaboration. So in many of these areas, collaboration, they're within a percentage point. A quiet space to work, they're within 5 percentage points. FaceTime with management is where we start. In-person meetings, a one percentage point difference. There's two stark areas that is interesting to see. The executives don't value building camaraderie amongst the team. Seems an odd thing. If you want people to come in to be part of the team, but you don't value that, that might be something for executives to consider, especially as it relates to the car business, because we think so much in sales in particular that salespeople are a team of one. But the best teams that I've seen are the teams that actually operate as a team, not a group of individuals. But the other thing that stands out in stark contrast here is that management values much more highly than non-executives FaceTime with management. And so this is where I think we got to ask the question, why do executives overvalue the leadership qualities of their managers? because clearly the staff don't want FaceTime with the executives or with their managers, where the executives actually value that considerably more. Why is that? So that's, I think, a place that we ought to look at and understand where that ties back into the positivity thing. So one of the things that they touch on here in this survey is reviews. And I think as managers, too often we get too regimented in when I do it. It's a quarterly review. It's a monthly review. Meanwhile, there are hours and hours and hours of work being done with your employees wondering, am I doing it well or am I not doing it well? And I got to wait until I get there. And most of the feedback that they're getting between those reviews are not positive. They're corrective. They're directive. And they're not collaborative necessarily. They may be to some extent, but it's really, this is where the empowerment piece really, I believe, really plays a role. So when we're empowering our team, are we giving them the leeway to come up with a plan and maybe provide some guardrails around how they may go about it to find most success, but allowing those folks to come up with a plan themselves? And I think a lot of times as managers, and we see this a lot, we call it the player coach syndrome, where the managers come down to do the work because we feel like in order for it to be done well, the way I want it, the most quickly, I'll just do it myself. Rather than taking the time to empower the team to really think about, well, how would you do it? What would your plan be? How would you go about it? What would be some of the time constraints around it? So that we're coming up with so that we're getting the team to start thinking creatively, to get the team, these individuals in the team to think critically about the best way to solve whatever the problem is that they're working on at that time. And if we're constantly doing that work, you can imagine it starts breaking down the trust in a non-communicated way. Now you're coming down to do their work. They see you doing their work. They're thinking now, okay, well, now I start quiet quitting. So my boss isn't giving me feedback necessarily. They're just doing the work. The team's moving forward, and I don't feel empowered or inspired or anything, especially for the folks in this study, which were in-office workers, desk workers. So why are they feeling so negative about having to come into the office? I really think it comes down to positive feedback. And we talk about this a lot. In order for people to get more productivity out of your team, you need to be filling up your positivity bank. And that is, your team's going to be way more receptive to feedback, critical or otherwise, if you filled up that positivity bank. Within any team, there's going to be really high performers, your mid-range folks, and then the folks that are just not getting it done at the same level. And as a manager or a leader, their success and failure is a reflection on you, right? We always have to take that simple approach to how we want to be accountable for our team, right? Their success, their failures, they're a reflection of my leadership capabilities. Okay, having said that, there isn't anybody on your team that if you sat there now and thought critically about it, that you couldn't say something positive to, that you couldn't give them a shout out now to say, hey, I really appreciate that you did this. Now, this gets back into doing the work up front. A lot of that feedback should be centered around when they did things well that were a reflection of our values and behaviors in our culture code. This is a much bigger conversation. But when you have that culture code built and define those values and what it looks like when what their activities are exemplifying the values, now you have something to base it off of, not just, hey, a great job following up with the customer. No. Great job doing that work with the client. That really endorsed what we value. And I really appreciate that you followed through with that behavior, right? When you think more critically about not just, hey, thanks for showing up to work on time, or thanks for, putting in that little bit of extra time. Give them some detail around it because it's going to have so much more value to them. And so what I might challenge you to do, and this would be for the week of February 20th, is just check in and use this as a way to see the value of positivity. I want you to shoot a text to each one of the individuals on your team. For the executives, I might have you do this down to your VP or your director level, but I want you to take the next 30 minutes and just shoot out some texts to these individuals, each one of them, every one of them. And you got to give them some positivity. You got to make a deposit today. And then look on Friday and see if you didn't see a difference. Now, if you have some things in place that allow you to inspect what you expect from a productivity standpoint, now you have something analytical. I might be interested in hearing what you found in those numbers, if you happen to see this. If you don't, just a general feel of what you found this last week. And we'll check in here on Friday as a little reminder if anybody took part in our little positivity study here today. So for this week, let's make some deposits in the positivity bank and see the power that has. Because we don't need to wait a month or 90 days to do a performance review. The ones that have the most value are the ones that come in unsolicited. Do you think your partner appreciates a gift that comes out of the blue more than one that's expected on a certain holiday, right? That's when it's authentic. That's when it actually matters to people. So I would urge you today, make that deposit in the positivity bank, and we'll check in later on this week and keep this conversation going. But I really believe, especially now when we're transitioning, I don't care what your industry is, this is a transitory period. This is a transition period in business, and in so many ways, not just business, and everything that we're seeing, the power of positivity is going to have a bigger impact for us now than it ever will. So I look forward to hearing back from you all later on this week. If you have some comments or anything that you might want to add to the conversation, please put it in the comments. And we look forward to hearing back from you. Thanks.